بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Last week we spoke about the gathering of Christians that was held in the year 1095 of the Gregorian calendar, a gathering that was called by the Pope of the Catholic Church at the time, Urban II, in Clermont in France. And in this gathering he announced his official intention for the formation of a Christian army that would march to the Holy Land and take Jerusalem. So Christians, they started coming from all over Europe to be part of this army, from Hungary, from England, from France, from all over Europe, wanting to be part of this army with the intention of taking Jerusalem. Now there were a number of poor Christians who were very excited about this prospect of being part of this army, because if they were part of the army, then they would be provided food, right? So this was a way for them to satisfy their hunger, being part of this army. And in addition to that, if they could conquer these lands, then they could become rich off of those lands that they conquered. So it attracted a lot of poor people to be part of that army. The monks and the priests, they also became very excited about the prospect of taking these holy lands from the Muslims. And there was a monk who was known as Peter the Hermit, and he became impatient waiting for the rulers to organize an official government-sanctioned army. So the Pope announced this plan for the formation of an army, but that takes time, right? To prepare the army, to train the army, to get the supplies, all of that takes some time. So this man, Peter the Hermit, this monk, he became impatient waiting for the rulers to organize an official army. So he actually just formed his own army that consisted mostly of laymen, right? Mostly of these poor Christians who didn't have any military training. He made his own army with these people, and he started to move forward without being given official permission to do so from the Catholic Church. So it was not an officially sanctioned army. Rather, it was an army of laymen who were not military trained. But their numbers were huge. Peter the Hermit was able to gather an army of 80,000 people. But these 80,000 people, they were not really soldiers. They were just common men from the poor Christians. Anyways, in the year 1096, Peter the Hermit led this army and he took them to Constantinople. Now, Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. And as we mentioned earlier, the Byzantines were not Catholic Christians, they were Orthodox Christians. So before this, the Orthodox Christians and the Catholic Christians, they didn't used to get along. But with this common goal to take Jerusalem from the Muslims, they united regarding this. So when Peter the Hermit and his Catholic army reached Constantinople, the Orthodox Byzantine Empire provided them with ships and boats to cross over the Bosphorus River in order to get into Anatolia, where they would face off with the Seljuks, with the Seljuk army. Now, the army of Peter the Hermit, their intention was that, okay, we'll cross over the Bosphorus, we'll meet with the Seljuk army, we'll fight the Seljuk army, we'll defeat them. Once we defeat them, then we can move towards Sham, we can move to south towards Syria, and then continue south towards Jerusalem. This was their plan. But when they did cross the Bosphorus River and they met with the Seljuk army, that's a real official army, that's a trained army. So when this battle took place between the forces of Peter the Hermit and the army of the Seljuk Empire destroyed them. The Seljuk army crushed the forces of Peter the Hermit, and that put an end to this unofficial crusade that was led by Peter the Hermit. And again, we say unofficial because it was not the official crusade that was sanctioned by the Catholic Church. But that official crusade, the one that was being organized while all of this was going on, the rulers and the Catholic Church, they were preparing their army while this was all going on. They were preparing the official army. And a few months later, the official army actually moved forward. And this would be known, this army, the official army, the crusade that was led by them, that became known as the Prince's Crusade. The previous unofficial crusade led by Peter the Hermit and these laymen, that was known as the Pauper's Crusade, the crusade of the poor people, right? And it was unofficial. But now this official crusade that came to be a few months later, that was known as the Prince's Crusade, because that was actually led by the leaders of the Christian lands, and that was a crusade that was officially sanctioned by the church, by the Catholic Church. All right. So the official crusade that happened a few months after the Pauper's Crusade, their end goal, again, the goal was the same. The goal was what? To take Jerusalem. To go first to Constantinople, get the support from the Orthodox Byzantines, move past the Bosphorus River, defeat the Seljuks. Once you defeat the Seljuks, then you go south into Sham, and you continue south until you reach Palestine and take Jerusalem. So this was their game plan. Now this crusade, this official crusade, the Prince's Crusade, this was very highly organized, unlike the Pauper's Crusade, which took place months before. The Prince's Crusade was a highly organized crusade with very well-trained soldiers, sophisticated weaponry, and the number of soldiers, and these are not just common people from the street, these are well-trained soldiers. The number of soldiers who came from all over Europe, these soldiers, they came from France, from Italy, from all over Europe, the number of soldiers in this official army reached 150,000, right? So it was a huge army of these crusaders. All right, so towards the end of the year 1096, this official army, it reached Constantinople, and the Byzantine ruler there in Constantinople, he provided support for the Crusaders, again, to cross over the Bosphorus River into Anatolia. So once this official Christian army, Crusader army, once they crossed the Bosphorus, then they came face to face with the Seljuks. Now, in the previous unofficial crusade, the Seljuks destroyed that army, because that army was an army of untrained, common laymen. But this army, first of all, is much bigger, 150,000 people, and these people are well trained, and they have sophisticated weaponry, and they are very well prepared. So the Seljuks, this time they were not able to resist the Crusader army, and the Crusader army took over the Seljuk capital of Nicaea, right? So they actually took over the Seljuk capital, the city of Nicaea. And after this defeat of the Seljuks, the Seljuk Empire actually broke into 5 separate states. Before this crusade, they had already broken up in the year 1077, about 20 years earlier. The Seljuk Empire actually already did break up into 2 states. But now after this crusade, after the defeat at Nicaea, they were divided into 5 different states. So basically it broke up the unity of the Seljuks. Now after the Crusaders took Nicaea from the Seljuks, then they headed south to Antakya, which is in northern Sham. So this was the pathway that they were taking towards Jerusalem. First they have to go into Antioch, then they continue going south. Eventually their plan was to go all the way to Al-Quds, all the way to Jerusalem. So after they took Nicaea, then they headed south to Antioch in northern Sham. And they made a siege around Antioch. They had to take Antioch from the Muslims first before they could continue on. So Antioch was a land that was controlled by the Muslims. So the Christian Crusaders, they made a siege around Antioch. And the Fatimis, the Ismaili Fatimis who were based in Egypt, and they had some strongholds in other places in Sham as well, they, instead of sending help to the Muslims against these Crusaders, what did they do? They sent a message of congratulations to the Crusaders. Look at the betrayal, the treachery of these people, these Fatimi, Ismaili, Shia. They sent a message of congratulations to the Christian crusaders for conquering Nicaea from the Seljuks. Look at this, right? So you can see whose side they are on. Look at the betrayal of these people. All right. Now, as for the Muslim forces throughout the Muslim lands, they tried to mobilize their armies to thwart the threat of the crusaders, right? The leader of Halab, he organized a small army and he tried to go to Antioch and to face and confront the Christian crusaders there, but he was unable to defeat them, right? And in the year 1098, the crusaders, they received even more support from Europe. They already had 150,000 soldiers, plus a lot of weaponry and supplies. Now they received even more support from Europe to continue the siege of Antioch, right? The siege of Antioch. So this is, the next step in their master plan to go and take over Jerusalem. They have to take Antioch first, right? So they had the siege of Antioch. It was lasting a long time. They weren't able to take it easily. So they received reinforcement and support from the Christians of Europe. Now it was around this time that there was one of the Christian commanders, a man named Godfrey Bullion. He took a group of soldiers, all of the soldiers were there around Antioch, right? A huge army of 150,000 people. So this man, Godfrey Bullion, he took a group of those soldiers and he headed towards Ar-Ruha, which is in northern Iraq. He left Antioch, he took a group of soldiers with him and he went towards Ar-Ruha in northern Iraq. And the reason why he went there was because in this land, in Ar-Ruha in Iraq, it was controlled by the Muslims, but there was a population of Armenian Christians who were originally from Armenia, but they had settled in that area, Ar-Ruha in northern Iraq. They lived there and they asked for Godfrey Bullion, this man, to help them break loose from Islamic rule. They said, we want independence from Islamic rule. So this man, Godfrey Bullion, and his soldiers, with support from the Armenian Christians on the inside, he was able to take over the land of Ar-Ruha. And he established a kingdom there, a base there, and that became known as the Christian kingdom of Ar-Ruha. And look at this. This is a Christian kingdom established in the Muslim lands. Right? So this was considered a big defeat for the Muslims, that now Christians are establishing their own kingdoms on Muslim lands. Right? So this man, Godfrey Bullion, he established the kingdom of Ruha, the Christian kingdom of Ruha, on those Muslim lands. And from there, as his base, he continued to expand. He continued to take over lands that were nearby. And eventually he reached all the way to Hims in Syria, and Hama and Baalbek. Right? He reached all of these places. From Ruha as his base, he took over all of these lands and expanded the Christian kingdom of Ar-Ruha. So look at this. Christians are expanding and taking over Muslim lands. Now again, the Fatimis, these Ismailis, in the meantime, they're not trying to help the Muslims at all. Rather, what are they doing? They're sending delegations with gifts to the Christian crusaders, congratulating them for their victories. With each victory that these Christians have, each city that they take over, the Fatimis send them gifts and congratulations, right? So it's obvious that these people are people of treachery, and they are against the Muslims. Even though they called themselves Muslims, they were actually actively against the Muslims, and they were happy when the Muslims were defeated. So the Fatimis, as we mentioned many times before, they're people of khiyana, people of treachery, people of betrayal. They are from the worst people in the history of this ummah. They caused more damage to the ummah than anyone, right? So this is a history that cannot be forgotten, right? These Fatimis, Ismailis, this is the way that they were. So every time the Christians would take over another land, the Fatimis would send them gifts and congratulations. And they also tried to make a deal with these Christian crusaders. They said, look, we will support you, and we'll make a deal with you. You can have the northern half of Sham. We will support you to take the northern half of all of Sham, and we will take the southern half of Sham. You take the northern half, we take the southern half of Sham. And when we say Sham, we're talking about greater Syria, which includes Syria, Lebanon, Philistine, all of that, right? So the Fatimids tried to make a deal with the Crusaders. You take the northern part of Sham, we will take the southern part of Sham. So the Crusaders initially, they agreed to this. They said, okay, instead of having to fight and continue on with wars, they said, okay, we will agree to this deal, but with one condition, that we need Jerusalem. We want Jerusalem. But the Fatimids said, no, but Jerusalem is in our half. Philistine is in the southern part. We said you can have the northern part and we have the southern part. And the southern part, it includes Jerusalem. The Christians said, no, there is no deal unless we also have Jerusalem. We want Jerusalem. So the Fatimids, they did not agree to this because they feared that if they themselves had the southern part of Sham, but the Christians had Jerusalem, then they felt that that would be a threat to their own existence, right? That there's a Christian stronghold right in the middle of the land that we have control over. We have the whole south of Sham, but they have control in Jerusalem, which is right in the middle of our lands, right? So they didn't want to do that, so they did not agree to that condition, and then the Christians said, okay, then there is no deal. There is no deal. So the Christians, their main objective for these crusades is Jerusalem. So they're not going to agree to any type of deal that does not include Jerusalem. Because their whole objective in starting these crusades was to take over Jerusalem. So that deal between the Fatimids and the Crusaders, it did not work out. All right, now in the middle of the year 1098, one of the Christians who was living in Antioch, remember, Antioch, there's a siege. The Crusaders, they have surrounded Antioch, right? But they have not been able to penetrate the walls of the city yet. And this siege has lasted for a pretty long time now. There was a person who lived, a Christian man who was living in Antioch, and he made a backdoor deals with the Crusader army on the outside. And what did this Christian do? He opened the gates for them, and they came into Antioch. And once the Crusaders came into Antioch with the help of this Christian guy from the inside, then the Muslims lost control of Antioch. The Crusaders took it over. So that was the fall of Antioch. 3 days after the fall of Antioch, 3 days later, then the Abbasid army arrived to help the people of Antioch. But it was too late. They came 3 days too late, right? So now the Christians are already inside, the Crusaders are already inside the walls of Antioch, and then the Abbasid army arrives. So it's already too late. But they said, okay, the Christian army is inside now. Now we will make a siege on the outside. Just like they made a siege before and they came in, now they're inside, now we will make a siege. And we will force them to come out or to fight us face to face. So the Abbasid army, they sieged Antioch with the Crusader army inside the walls of Antioch. Right? And it was a very severe siege. The Abbasid army was pretty big. Right? It was a pretty severe siege, and the Christians, they could not get out of the walls of Antioch. Eventually they ran out of food, and the siege was still going on. So the Christian army, they're suffering inside the walls of Antioch. They had to actually eat dogs inside there because they didn't have any food, right? And then the morale of the Christian army inside Antioch had started to decline. But this siege is lasting so long, we have no food. So they started to lose hope, right? And they started to lose their drive. They started to lose their motivation. Now one of the Christians from the army, in order to reignite their motivation, he staged a whole act. He made a whole drama, this guy. So what he did, he took a spear and he buried it, he secretly buried it in one of the churches of Antioch, one of the churches that was in Antioch. He buried the spear there. Then, the next day, in the morning, he announced to the people that he had a dream. He said, I had a dream last night, and Isa alayhi salam came in my dream. Jesus came in my dream, and he told me that his spear, and what he meant by his spear is the spear that was used when the Christians say that when they believe that Isa alayhi salam was crucified. We as Muslims, we know that Isa alayhi salam was not crucified, right? But the Christians, they believe that he was crucified on the cross. And they believe that when he was crucified, in order to make sure he was dead, they hit him with a spear. They lanced him with a spear to make sure that he's dead. So that spear they say touched the body of Isa alayhi salam, they considered that spear to be something very holy, right? So this man, he said that, okay, I had a dream and Jesus told me in the dream that that spear is buried in this church here in Antioch. Right? So this guy, he staged this all before. He just took a random spear and he buried it there. But then he made up this dream and he said, I saw this dream, and he said that the spear, that holy spear, is buried there. So they go to that church, they dig in that church, and they find the spear. Right? So then the Christians, they're fooled by this. They say, oh, look at this is a miracle. Now we have the spear of Isa alayhi salam. Now we can never be defeated, right? So their motivation, it came back. The motivation came back, and they felt a new sense of energy, right? So they sent a message to the Abbasid military who was outside making the siege, and they said, we want to come out now. We're ready to come out, and we want to fight face to face. We want to come out and fight face to face. So the Abbasid commander, he agreed. Now while the Christians were organizing their army, and remember they had a big army, it's a huge army. The Christians are reorganizing their army. While they're reorganizing their army, the Muslim army, they start to have some type of infighting going on between them. Some disagreements and disputes within their army, right? So the Christians become united, the Muslims, they become disunited. The battle begins between the Crusader army and the Abbasid army at Antioch, and the Abbasid army is defeated because of the internal fighting that they were having within their own ranks, because of the disputes and the disagreements they were having. They could not keep a united front, and the Christian Crusader army was able to defeat the Abbasid army. So now the Crusader army has officially taken Antioch. Now they have Antioch, right? So now the next step is to continue south, continue on their way to Jerusalem. Now from Antioch to Jerusalem, they don't have any real resistance anymore. There's no big army now that can stand in their way. There may be some small armies from some small cities on the way, but there's no big major army that's standing in their way to Jerusalem now. So they take Antioch and they move south, continuing on towards the path towards Jerusalem. Now, the Muslim ruler of Tarablus, he tried to stop the Christian army on the path to Jerusalem. He tried to get in their way. He thought that, okay, maybe I can take my army. It was not a big army, but he thought, okay, maybe I can take my army and I can stand in their way, and maybe we can stop them from taking Jerusalem. So when the army of Tarablus came in the way of the Crusader army, the Crusaders saw this as an opportunity. Let's take Tarablus as well. So they actually altered their path. Instead of going straight to Jerusalem, they altered their path and they said, let's go to Tarablus as well. Tarablus was known to have riches. It was a place where there was wealth. So they said, we can take Tarablus and we can take the wealth there, and then after that, then we can go to Jerusalem. So they headed towards Tarablus, and the Crusader army, they sieged. They made a siege around Tarablus. So the people of Tarablus, they sought help. They said, we need help. They sent messages to the Abbasid ruler that sent an army to help us. They sent messages to some of the other small nation states around the area. Please send your armies to help us. They even sought help from the Fatimis. They sent a message to Egypt, to the Fatimis. Please send someone to help us against these crusaders. All right. Now, sadly, they did not get any response. They didn't get any help. But finally, while the siege was going on, a messenger from the Fatimis came. A messenger from the Fatimis from Egypt came. So they thought, okay, this is a response to our call for help. We asked the Fatimis for help. They sent someone. So this messenger is going to come and tell us, that an army is coming, or that, just stay calm, stay patient, just for a few more days. The army is on its way. That's what they thought this messenger was going to come to tell them. This messenger from the Fatimis. That's what they thought. Right? But what did the messenger from the Fatimis say? What was his message from the Fatimid Khalifa? His message to the people of Tarablus, who are under siege by the Crusaders, who need help. This messenger from the Fatimis, he says, our ruler, the Fatimi Khalifa, has come to know of such and such slave girl who lives in Tarablus. He came to know of her that she's a very beautiful slave girl who lives here. She's known for her beauty, so he wants to buy her. So this is why this messenger came, to buy this slave girl for his Khalifa. And also our Khalifa, he wants to buy some special wood that you guys have in Tarablus. You have some special trees that grow here, and there's a very good wood that comes from those trees. We would like to buy some of that wood as well to make some musical instruments. This is what the messenger came with. Not to help them, not with news that an army is coming to help you. No. We want to buy this slave girl, and we want wood to make musical instruments. This is the Fatimi dynasty. This is their legacy, a legacy of khiyana, of treachery, betrayal, right? They were the worst of the people. Wal-iyadhu billah. So after this, after the people of Tarablus heard that this is what the Fatimi messenger has come with, he didn't come to say that they're sending help, they're sending army, nothing. No one is going to help us. So this really destroyed their morale, and they decided to surrender. They just surrendered. And the Christians took over Tarablus, and they established a state in Tarablus as well. Right? So now this is the third state that the Christians have established in the Muslim lands. First they established the state of Ar-Ruha in northern Iraq. Then they established their state in Antioch after they took over Antioch. Now they have established the Christian state of Tarablus. Right? So three states that the Christians, the Crusaders, have established in the Muslim lands on their way to Jerusalem. Now from Tarablus, when they took over Tarablus and made that their base, then they expanded into Lebanon, they took Beirut, and they took other cities as well. Right? Alright, so now they took Tarablus. Now they want to continue to their main goal on the way to Jerusalem, on the way to take over Al-Quds. So they continued their march towards Jerusalem. And the first one from the Crusader army to reach Jerusalem was Godfrey Bouillon, the same guy who established the kingdom of Ruha. He's the first one with his group of the army who reached Jerusalem. And then the rest of the people from the Crusader army reached as well, and the Christian army, the Crusader army, they laid a siege upon Jerusalem. They surrounded Jerusalem. And these Christians, they had advanced weaponry, they had a lot of supplies coming in from Europe, they had catapults, right? They had mobile towers that would help them breach the walls of the city, right? They had all of these things, right? So the siege of Jerusalem by the Crusaders, it lasted for 42 days. It lasted for a period of 42 days, and after 42 days, on July 15th, 1099 of the Gregorian calendar, the Fatimis, who had control of Jerusalem at the time. Remember, the Fatimis, they took control of Jerusalem from the Seljuks. When the Seljuks were busy fighting against the Crusaders in Nicaea, in Anatolia, when the Seljuks were busy with the Crusaders there, the Fatimis took advantage of this situation, and they used that opportunity to take over Jerusalem, because they knew that the Seljuk forces were all busy fighting the Crusaders. So they thought, okay, Jerusalem is not going to be very well protected by the Seljuks because all of their soldiers are busy against the Crusaders in Nicaea. So the Fatimis had taken advantage of that opportunity, and they took Jerusalem at that time. So now when the Crusaders finally reached Jerusalem, who has Jerusalem at this time? It's not the Seljuks who have it. It's the Fatimis who have Jerusalem. And they are the ones, these people of khiyana, these people of betrayal and treachery, they are the ones who surrendered Jerusalem to the Crusaders. The Fatimis, they surrendered Jerusalem to the Crusaders after a siege of 42 days. And these Fatimis, even though they had Jerusalem, the Khalifa in Egypt, the Fatimi Khalifa with his base in Egypt, he never even sent an army from Egypt to help, to keep Jerusalem away from these Crusaders. He never even sent anyone to help, right? So the Fatimis, in the end, they ended up surrendering Jerusalem to the Crusaders. So that was the fall of Jerusalem. That is when the Crusaders took over Jerusalem. And when they entered Jerusalem, when the Crusaders entered Jerusalem, they began a great slaughter. They started killing everyone. They killed the men, whether they were combatants or non-combatants, it didn't matter. They killed men, they killed women, they killed children, boys, girls, it didn't matter, right? They killed everyone, right? The coward Fatimi governor of Jerusalem was a man named Iftikharuddin. he ran away and he barricaded himself in a castle, and he allowed the people to get slaughtered. He didn't try to help them or anything. He just wanted to save his own life. So he barricaded himself in a castle while the people on the outside were being slaughtered left and right. Those who were able to, they fled Jerusalem. Some people were able to escape. They fled Jerusalem. But as for those who could not escape from Jerusalem, they tried to take shelter in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. They went to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, inside Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, and in the courtyard of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, the surrounding areas of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, they tried to take shelter there. So it's mentioned that there were 100,000 people in and around Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. You know, in the area, in the courtyard of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and inside Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, 100,000 people. But the Christian commander ordered his soldiers, slaughter all of them, even in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Go into the masjid and kill them all in the masjid, and outside of the masjid, kill all of them. Slaughter the kids, slaughter the women, slaughter the men, slaughter everyone. That was the command that the Christian commander gave. So they did a great slaughter. They killed, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of people. They just slaughtered them, right? And, you know, some of the historical sources mention that it was like, there were like seas, rivers of blood in Jerusalem. Right? Some of them said that the blood was flowing to the knees length. If you're walking in the street, then like blood, it would come up to your knees. Right? That's how much blood there was. And there were limbs, arms and legs floating around in the blood. Right? That's how bad the situation was. That's how huge this slaughter was. Bodies all over the place, limbs all over the place, blood flowing through the city. Right? Basically a very, very, very terrible sight. Wal-iyadhu billah. So they slaughtered the people of Jerusalem, these Christians, these Crusaders, in a brutal way. And then they took over Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, and they divided Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa into a number of portions. Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, the third holiest masjid in Islam, after Al-Masjid Al-Haram in Mecca and Al-Masjid Al-Nabawi. Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa is the third holiest site in Islam. But these Christian Crusaders, they divided it into portions. They made one portion of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, they made it into a church. And another area, they made it into a living quarters for the soldiers. And another area, they made it as a storage space. And as for the underground part of the masjid, there's an underground part of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa as well. They made that as the stable for their horses, where they would keep their horses, right? This is what they did to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Now compare that to when the Muslims under Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh conquered Jerusalem from the Christians, right? A few centuries earlier, Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, he conquered Jerusalem from the Christians. And how did he deal with those Christians? He treated them justly. He granted them safety, right? He did not destroy their churches. He allowed them to remain peacefully in Jerusalem. That's what happened when the Muslims conquered Jerusalem from the Christians. But now, when the Christians conquered Jerusalem from the Muslims, look what they did. Right? Look what they did. They slaughtered the Muslims. And they took over Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. They made it into part of it into a church. They made part of it into stables for their horses. Look at the disrespect of these people. Wal-iyadhu billah. This was the reality of these Crusaders. So now after the Crusaders took over Jerusalem, the neighboring cities, the cities around there, they all just surrendered without any resistance, without any fight, because they feared that if we try to resist, then we will be slaughtered like the people of Jerusalem were slaughtered. So Nablus, they surrendered without any resistance. They just opened their doors and they said, you can take the land, just don't kill us, right? So this is what happened with the first crusade. A very, very sad part of Muslim history, right? This first crusade and the fall of Jerusalem, one of the greatest tragedies that the Muslim Ummah ever faced. And this happened in the year 1099 of the Gregorian calendar. Now this man, Godfrey Bouillon, he became the ruler of the newly established Christian kingdom of Jerusalem. They called it the Kingdom of Jerusalem, right? And Godfrey Bouillon became the first ruler of this newly established Christian kingdom of Jerusalem. Now, some of the ulama, some of the people of knowledge who were able to flee from Jerusalem, they went to Baghdad. Some of them who were able to escape from Jerusalem, they went to Baghdad. And they were people of knowledge. And they started to give lectures and khutbas in Baghdad to awaken the people, to awaken the common people that, we have to wake up, we have to make jihad, we have to get Jerusalem back, right? And they protested at the palace of the Abbasid Khalifa. They criticized him. You fell so short. You didn't do enough to defend the Muslim lands. You're supposed to be the Khalifa. You're supposed to be Amir al-Mu'mineen. That's what you call yourself, right? But what did you do to protect the Muslims? What did you do to prevent the disbelievers from taking over Muslim lands? You didn't do anything, right? So they protested at the gate of the Khalifa. And the Khalifa came out, the Abbasid Khalifa, he came out and he said, yes, you're right. So I will announce jihad. I will announce jihad in the lands to take back Jerusalem from these Christians. So he said, the Abbasid Khalifa, he said, I will send messengers to the different governors. I will send messengers to the different governors, ordering them to organize their armies. So this is what he told the people. So he sent those messengers went, and those messengers came back, and nothing was done. It was all just big talk. That yes, I will make them organize their armies and send messengers, and I'll do this and I'll do that. Then nothing happened in the end. He ended up doing nothing at all. Right? So the Muslims were in really bad shape. Really bad shape. The Christians had established a number of kingdoms within the Muslim lands, and it was really a very terrible situation for the Muslim Ummah. Very dark times for the Muslim Ummah. Inshallah, next week we'll continue and we'll talk about the aftermath of the fall of Jerusalem to the Crusaders. We'll speak about that in our next session, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير وبارك الله فيكم والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.